Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Genius Entrepreneur Podcast. I love these conversations because I want to provide inspiration to you about how to think about your genius and your story in a different way, because you have the power to influence other people. Whether you're already in business or whether you're thinking about writing a book or becoming more of an influencer and a speaker, it's always good to think about how your genius can inspire others. And today we have the opportunity to explore the story about how a genius has turned into an income stream and a community and something that's really impactful. And I'm really excited for this interview today, and I'll let Melanie introduce herself. But Melanie and I have been working together in a few different capacities in Montana, and it's really fun to hear her story and to hear about her ambition of what she's going to do with her current book, Lifejackets. So Melanie, welcome to the program. Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Shelby Joe. Nice to be here. And I loved you called me a genius, so that makes me feel good. But I was thinking about that. I said it's interesting that yes, you do have some genius in you that you maybe didn't realize you had. So that's kind of how my story got started. I recently wrote a book. It's called Lifejackets. Here's what it looks like. Oh, sorry.
There we go.
And it's my personal story about my journey through our daughter's addiction. And when I wrote it, I actually wrote it during COVID because there was not much going on, and I always wanted to write the book, and I thought this is a good time. But once I started writing it, I realized I probably do have a lot of genius in being the mother of someone that's got a substance use disorder, a genius that you didn't really want or expect. But sometimes those make for the best life stories. And so when I started writing the book and then it got published and people started reading it, and I had a lot of interesting reaction to it because a lot of people were like, I had no idea. I didn't know you were experiencing this. You're so strong and all of those things. And I'm like, well, no, I wasn't strong because I didn't share it. I should have been more transparent when it was happening. So it's kind of it's a really easy read. It's great for anybody who is in that world right now where they have someone that they really care about that's experiencing addiction. And it kind of tells you all the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think we all make similar mistakes, and I think we can all learn from them. So that's the history of the book.
The history of the book.
Yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit more about you, because
Mhm.
I think understanding you and where you were at the time that you were going through this, I think
Yeah.
for me, I've heard you tell the story a few times and I've seen you
Mhm.
speak about it, and we've known each other for a while. But to me,
Mhm.
that context and that place of where you were during that experience, I
Mhm.
think is definitely what connects with other people because it makes such an impact on your life.
I think that that is really true because I think when people hear that part of my story, and I'll tell it here in a second, I think they start to say, oh my gosh, if she can do this or she was experiencing this and we didn't know, maybe I can also share. So where it started was we have two daughters, and when she was a teenager, and really started to notice her behavior changing, a lot of changes in her behavior, but I didn't think much of it, thought it was just kind of that typical high school person. I was early in my career, and not early, but kind of mid in my career, but I was kind of in that acceleration part of your career where you're, working really hard, doing a lot of hours. There's a lot of things going on. And we had another daughter as well. So we're also taking care of her and making sure she was okay. Well, I got a call one night, and it was a friend of our daughter. Her name's Morgan. And they said, hey, she's been in a car accident and we need you to come over here. And so I was like, oh my gosh, and I arrive on the car accident and there's all these ambulances and fire and police cars. And I'm like, somebody, it looked bad. And so when I got to the wreck, she wasn't there and her car wasn't there. And I was like, maybe she was in the car. Couldn't figure it out. Anyway, I went over to the policeman. And as I'm walking over to the policeman, I can hear her and she's crying and screaming, and she sees me and she's freaked out that I'm there. And I go over to her and she is obviously super intoxicated. I mean, beyond just social drunk. And I was like, oh my goodness. And it hit me like a ton of bricks because two reasons. First of all, I knew we had a bigger problem than what we thought we had. And she was also in such a strange state, like she was afraid of me. And I was like, how would she be afraid of me? So anyway, fast forward that story. The reason I tell that story is substance use disorder or addiction is actually a disease. And most people find out they have a disease. Maybe you have cancer or you have diabetes or heart disease. You usually find that out in a doctor's office. Well, the sad part about substance use disorder is you usually find out in a crisis. And it usually involves the criminal justice system. And so that's a really traumatic way to learn that you've got a problem. And it isn't cared, you're not cared for in the same way you'd be cared for if you were in a doctor's office and somebody just told you you had diabetes. And so the truth of it is, the minute you know that you've got that problem, or somebody you love does, is there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of embarrassment, there's a lot of, we got to hide this. Nobody can know that this is happening to our family. And on the backside of this, I'm still in my career. I work in the corporate world. I have a very front-facing job. And all I could think about was nobody can know this is happening in our home. And so then that day, for almost 10 straight years, we dealt with her substance use disorder every single day in our family. And we actually still do. I still think about it every single day, but she is in recovery now. She's doing very well, but you still think about it all the time. You're always worried.
Yeah. That's just, I get the tingles every time you talk about it. It just makes such an impactful story.
Yeah.
And you decided to write the book. So you talked about writing the book during pandemic. What was and I'm just referring to my own experience now about when I wrote my own book and wrote my story, and like what a therapeutic thing that was for me, and how it helped me connect with the emotions that I had many, many years ago, and B, kind of develop those relationships around me. And I can't remember what my inspiration was, but it was like, I just need to tell the story. I just feel like there's a story in here that just needs to be heard, and I need to speak it just for my own good, but then also it might help other people think about theirs. So talk to me about what inspired you to write that, and what kind of transformation you went through in that process. Because I feel that that's what holds people back sometimes about discovering the genius of their experience. You know what I mean? So
Right. Well, I think what happened was the book that I had intended to write was going to be a short, more fictional story about a family going to treatment, because that was the most impactful thing that has ever happened to me, quite honestly, in this whole trajectory of her substance use, was when we finally sent her to treatment. And I believed, and I think every mother, friend, spouse believes, that when they go to treatment, this is going to be fixed and we are going to have our life back. And so most treatments have what they call family week or family care of some sort. And the family comes and gets to, interact with their person, but also gets to get a little bit of treatment for themselves. And so I thought this was just going to be a fabulous experience. And it was actually one of the most traumatic experiences I'd ever had in my life. It was awful. It was one of the first times I actually was suicidal for myself. Like, I thought of self-harm. And it was also, it did not really build the rapport that I thought we were going to get with our daughter when she came back. And the other thing that was just traumatic was when she did come back, she started using again within 24 hours. And so that whole process that I had put all of my hope in, all of my eggs in that basket, was devastating because it didn't work. It didn't bring anything that I thought it was going to bring. So that was going to be my original story, was just this story of going to treatment. But when I wrote those few chapters, and they're kind of wedged in the middle of the book, I thought there isn't any context here. We've got to go back and figure out, people need to understand what happened and some of the triggers that come along with this. And then I think after a failed treatment, you also have to really hunker down and try to find hope, because as long as they're alive, there is hope. But you also learn really quickly it's not your disease, and you've got to let them go take care of themselves. And if you've given up your life for their disease, now you've got to go reclaim your life. And that was hard for me, because I I wanted to hover. I wanted to be the helicopter mom, but I also wanted this really fabulous career. And I really wanted our other daughter to be okay. And so I was just run ragged. And it was really challenging. And I always tell this story for especially professional women. I had an experience one time where she had gotten a DUI, and I had a business meeting the following morning at 7 a.m. And I got up that morning and found out that she was in jail. And I was like, do I go to my business meeting and then go get her out of jail? Or am I a horrible mother because I'm prioritizing my work over her? And I just had all these horrible thoughts in my head. I did go to the business meeting and then I went and got her out of jail. But I don't think people realized I was making those kinds of decisions on the fly every day. And it wears on you, and it affects your performance. It affects your family. It affects every part of your life. And I really, really, really want to help people understand that you have to reclaim your life. You cannot give it up for someone else's disease. You can care for them, you can love them, you can, take things to them, but you can't give your whole self up.
When I heard you speak earlier this year, you did that activity with the different colors and
People.
how out of 100 people, and you know this statistic, I don't, so I want you to tell us what that is, but how many people out of 100 are the caregiver for a person that is in substance abuse or is dealing with that some in one way or another?
Right. I do this really fun exercise, what you just said. There's 100 people and they're all different colors. And some of the colors represent addiction, some represent suicidal ideation, some represent domestic violence, some represent caretakers like myself. There's all these different colors, but over 40% of people in the world are having some experience in this. Mental health is the other one that is very prevalent. But if you think about that and you think about your workplace, and let's just say you have a team of 10, 4 people are having some experience that either they're not sharing with you because they're embarrassed or ashamed, or they just can't, right? Like they just haven't hit that place yet. But we're really, really working to make sure that our workplaces are aware when people are having trouble, like myself, that they can get the assistance that they need. For me, it wasn't until I got a call that she had had another DUI. It was actually her 4th DUI. I was sitting in my office and I actually probably almost had a breakdown of some sort. I just started crying. All of my colleagues came in, my boss came in, and I finally just blurted it out. And they're all just like, oh my gosh, we had no idea. And I'm like, I know. And they were so kind. And I regretted that I hadn't told them sooner because they could have been supportive and helpful, but I was so worried that it would stunt my career that I couldn't share that with people. But once I did and people knew, then I got a lot of grace. I got a lot of compassion. I got a lot of, do you need something? I got a lot of time to go take care of her when I needed to, and I didn't have to hide it and be embarrassed by it anymore. So that showed me that there is a different way, especially if you're working. And that's the other thing I really want to champion in sharing this story, sharing this book, and the work that I'm doing is most employers will take care of you. If you're valuable to them, they'll take care of you, and don't be embarrassed or ashamed to talk with them about it privately.
Well, and I don't know if you thought that at the time, but now you have a whole business around that.
Yeah.
help create that transparency and that to help employers care for their workers. So can you talk about that? Because I don't know. I don't know. It's interesting. I don't know if that was like intended or if that I mean, that's a natural consequence of telling your story and providing this caretaking. So talk about your it's escaping my
Upstream Strategy Partners is
Upstream
the name of
strategy
yeah.
partners.
So
Talk about that and the mental health.
yeah, I know I wasn't expecting to turn it into a business either. However, once I wrote the book and people started reading it and people started reaching out to me like, oh I get people all the time. It's like, can I get 2 of your books? Because I need to give them to my sister and my brother. People are having this experience so often, and until somebody like me brings it to the light, they're not going to do much with it. But the minute somebody does start talking about it, they're open to it. They're like, oh, I want to do that. I want to talk about that. I want to read your book. Super interesting. I just had a lady really recently. She was interested in some of the work I was doing, and I said, I have a book that I published, and she said, well, can you send it to me? I did. She called me in tears, and she's like, I have the exact same story. I didn't know that's what we were talking about. So, but anyway, long story short, Upstream Strategy Partners is my business that I have right now. And the reason I called it Upstream is there's a Desmond Tutu quote that is, if we would go upstream and see why people are falling in, why are people falling into substance use disorder at the rate that they are right now? Why do we have so much mental health challenges right now? And there are reasons, and there are determining factors at really young ages that we could be looking at. And so my whole theory is, if we would go upstream and just take a look at what happened or why is this happening, and you can use an upstream strategy in any part of your life. I use it for this piece, but you can use it in your business all the time. If you're constantly in this problem-solving mode, just every single day, grinding it out to solve problems, you need to stop and go upstream and figure out, where are they coming from? Why is this happening? And I think if we all did that and we took care of each other in those moments when it isn't a crisis, then we would have a much better society and people would be happier.
Right. And you're providing the ability for more education about that, and more strategy and more ideas to be able to make the workplace better and
Yeah.
more
Well, it's interesting because I
place,
did,
if you will. So
I did workforce development for many years. And so I've always been intrigued by how influential your workplace is, how influential your colleagues are, your environment, the work that you do, the passion, all of those things play into it. And so when I started adding this layer in, I was like, wow, this is another huge piece of what impacts people's productivity. You know, if you have somebody that's late every single day and you haven't asked the question, why? The answer isn't usually that they're lazy and they just keep oversleeping. It's usually something is happening in their life that they can't get to the place they need to be on time. Whether it's, I have to get my child to school, my husband's abusing me and I'm trying to, avoid that. There's always usually a reason. And so I think we have to start asking the why a lot sooner.
absolutely. Absolutely. So let's talk about life jackets as a part of Upstream. I think sounds like it's a part, but then like there's this whole other influencer side that you have to it. So talk about your vision for what your message is going to create for other people.
So my dream now for Lifejackets is to create a community. It'll have to be online because my dream is to have it all over the country.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people I interact with are usually moms and dads. And so that does seem to be something, but this could be anybody. It could be a spouse, a girlfriend, boyfriend, a partner, a colleague, anybody that you're working with. And I'm wanting to encourage people to join this community so that they have the resources that they need. They also have peer support. So if you're talking to me about your spouse's addiction, whole lot easier for me to understand than just somebody that you don't know at all. I'm also really excited about putting advocates in the workplaces where we get them training on mental health, substance use. So you have somebody within your sphere that isn't your boss or isn't HR that also has the ability to help you if you get in one of these situations. But the first step is really going to be about transparency, and it's a shift. It is. We don't talk about this openly. We still don't talk about it, even though I'm talking about it very openly. It still is not something that people do often in their workplace. And so I just want to change that. I said I kind of want to be the OSHA, the safety group of mental health and substance use, because if we talked about it the way we talk about how to use a ladder or safety of when you're running big major equipment, it's the same thing. You need to take care of the people that are working for you. And sometimes that is an unseen disease, unseen event that's happening in their life that you just don't know about.
Right. Right. It's not it's something that's like, it's local, but it's also like so many people are dealing with this. So there can be
Mhm.
just an enormous community around this mission that
Mhm.
all just ties together. So
Yeah. Well,
I
and
think
I
that's
think
a
there's
great thing.
50 states. If we had 100 people in every state, that were participating, I just think it would exponentially grow and people would then start to talk more about it and just help each other out.
Yeah, because you can't address it if you keep it inside.
If you
Okay.
don't know it, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Which is what I think in the full circle of the conversation, that to me, your genius is not your education. It's not everything that you know or your score on a test. Your genius is something that you've experienced and how you want to use that to influence others. And your story, I think, is a perfect example of that, because you told your story, even though it was challenging for you and your family.
Mhm.
But look at all the opportunities and the influence that you're going to have in these other communities and around the world. So I think
Mhm. Yeah.
it's great.
I know. And I'm excited to my other goal is to travel to some of these other places in the United States, especially because that's where we're seeing a lot of issues right now, and talk to other families, parents, spouses, workplaces. I mean, I think there's just so much value in seeing someone who's experienced it, sharing their story with you and making you feel like, hey, you're not crazy. You didn't embarrass your family. You are good. It's like you're okay. So, and that I think it also sends a message of hope that our daughter is in recovery, and that is fantastic. And people who have somebody that they care about that's experienced this, having them in recovery is amazing, but also still a little trepidatious, if you will. So I want people to know that that's a normal feeling.
Yeah. Well, Melanie, where can our audience find more out about you and your business and all the things that you have to offer?
Yeah. So if you want the book, it's available on Amazon. It's also on Audible, all of the usual places. But I have the new community will be called the Life Jacket Club. And I love that name because the reason I named the book Life Jackets was while I was doing this, I was working with a book coach and she said, "Tell me what it feels like." And I said, "It feels like I'm throwing them a life jacket. I can see that they're drowning. I throw them a life jacket and they ignore it." And then as we wrote the book, it became like this interesting metaphor of the person who really needed the life jacket was myself. And so, yes, you're trying to save someone and you would like to put precautions for them, but you really have to save yourself. And that's the purpose behind the life jacket name and the emblem. And I don't know, I have it on my cup too, but you can see I took the life jacket and I made a little heart in the middle so that, people just need to remember there's the reason that you care so much is because you love them. Deep down, you love them, even though this disease is just wreaking havoc on your family. So that's why I put the heart in the life jacket. So I figure the Life Jacket Club will come to life and everybody will have a life jacket sticker somewhere, hopefully on their water bottle or their book.
Yeah,
And also just if you see that symbol, you know that you can support someone with it.
absolutely. Absolutely. Such power in that. We'll be sure to include your website and
Yes.
your LinkedIn profile in the show
Uh-huh.
notes so everybody
Yep.
can follow you when they need
Yep.
you. But I just really appreciate you coming here and telling your story. I think it's
Uh,
so inspirational. I think it's something that connects to people, even though they might be 1 degree of separation from it, it still affects them.
mhm. Yep.
And to the advocacy for telling the story and being open about it, I think that is only going to make a much bigger difference in the workplace, but
Mhm.
then also as you build your brand around that, I think it's amazing. So
Yeah.
thank you for,
Yes. Well, thank you for having me.
of course. And do you have any events coming up that we need to be aware of?
Let's see. I am going to most likely be speaking at a sober living conference in Las Vegas. That's in the end of October. And so that's exciting. And then we have a local conference here called the McGuire Conference. And so I'm going to be speaking there. But I think you'll see me out and about quite a bit in 2025. That's my goal, is to really make this my full-time career, is out speaking and coordinating and networking with people that have had a similar experience. So I will make sure to keep my website updated and LinkedIn.
Perfect. Well, we will follow along and keep you in our thoughts as you do so. So thank you for coming on to tell your story.
Thank
And to
you.
all of you other potential genius entrepreneurs out there, tell your story. Your experience means something, and you can create a community around that, about the transformation that you've made. And the story that we've heard is a great example of that. So I encourage you all to do that. And if you want some help, please reach out. I have a whole community of people around me, including Melanie, that can help draw that story out and help you create a business around your ideas. So I look forward to seeing you next time on the Genius Entrepreneur Podcast when we learn about more opportunities. See you next time.